Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty big today. How AI could change immigration if, hypothetically, there's a second Trump administration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our source is this super interesting YouTube video transcript. It's got all these different voices, like security experts and lawyers and even advocacy groups.
Makes sense, yeah.
So we'll be looking at things like how AI could be used for mass deportation, or if surveillance might go beyond the borders, into communities.
I see, yeah.
And even some people think a second Trump administration would mean weaponizing AI, but others think it could mean deregulation.
That's fascinating how AI could be used in such different ways.
Totally. And what's really interesting about the source material is that it doesn't just present one side.
Right.
We get all these different perspectives on AI, how it might be used, maybe even misused.
Yeah, really gives you a lot to think about, especially looking ahead at what could happen.
Absolutely. Okay, so for some context, Trump made mass deportation a major campaign promise when he first ran for president. And this transcript, it highlights how he chose officials known for being really tough on immigration.
Okay.
It even mentions some of his statements about how large-scale these deportations should be. Like, it's super urgent.
So that's where AI comes in, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, they've been focusing more and more on AI.
Interesting.
They've got this new AI Safety and Security Board, plus a big budget for their AI office.
Oh.
But the source material actually quotes DHS Secretary Mayorkas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he says AI has both potential benefits and risks. It's like they're getting ready for a major shift, but we don't really know what that means yet.
A little mysterious, isn't it?
Right. Makes you wonder what they're preparing for.
Definitely.
Okay, so the source material also talks about this expert, Petra Molnar. She focuses on migration technologies.
Okay.
And she's worried a second Trump administration might use AI for, you guessed it, mass deportations. She says there's already this surveillance dragnet at the border.
Yeah.
And with AI, she thinks it could expand into communities all across the U.S.
So not just at the border anymore.
Exactly. It's pretty concerning. And what's even more troubling is that a lot of the technology behind this border surveillance is being developed by private companies.
Really?
Yeah, the transcript even quotes Molnar talking about this border industrial problem, which basically means companies are profiting from immigration enforcement, and that creates some messed up incentives.
I can see how that would be a problem.
Right, and then it gets even more complicated when you think about AI automating immigration decisions.
Oh, wow.
The source material quotes Ramaya Campbell. She's the acting commissioner for Homeland Security for D.C.
Okay.
And she suggests AI could be making deportation decisions without much regard for due process.
So like machines deciding people's fates.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary thought.
And in the source material, they really emphasize how important this idea of due process is, especially with AI involved.
Right.
Like, due process makes sure everyone is treated fairly by the legal system. You have the right to a hearing, to know what you're being accused of, to present evidence.
Yeah.
If AI starts making these choices without humans checking, it could totally mess those rights up.
That's a really good point.
Campbell also warns that AI could just end up making existing biases in the system even worse.
Oh, I see.
Like, imagine AI being used to target certain groups for deportation just because of some messed up algorithm, not because of actual evidence.
Wow.
And that could have terrible consequences, especially for people who are already vulnerable.
It's like a dystopian sci-fi movie or something where algorithms decide who gets to stay and who gets deported.
Exactly. And Campbell goes even further. She says AI could even become like an instrument of systemic bias and authoritarian rule. Basically, she thinks AI could be used to get more power and control, not for fairness or justice.
That is a pretty chilling thought.
It is.
Yeah.
But the source material doesn't just present one side,
Oh, right.
It also brings in Neil Sahota. He advises the UN on AI. He says AI is already being used for border management, and he thinks a second Trump administration will probably just use it even more.
So that's where we start seeing those contrasting views.
Exactly. Sahota points out that Customs and Border Protection already use AI-powered drones and those sensor towers to patrol the border.
Well, I've heard of those.
Like, the drones use computer vision to look at live video and spot people crossing the border.
Wow.
They can cover huge areas and work in tough environments, but there are limitations, of course.
Right.
Like bad weather or thick trees can mess them up. So even with all that fancy technology, humans are still needed.
Makes sense.
But Sahota also predicts that a second Trump administration might want even more automation.
Like what?
Things like autonomous patrols and widespread biometric screening. Imagine robots patrolling the border or using facial recognition to track everyone's movements.
That's crazy.
It's just a prediction, but it makes you think about privacy and AI going way beyond what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, for sure. And Sahota even mentions AI being used not just for border security, but to find and deport people already living here in the U.S.
It does sound like a sci-fi thriller, but it's possible with the technology we have now.
I know, it's kind of freaky.
And that's where those worries about due process come up again.
Right.
How can we make sure people's rights are protected if machines are making decisions about deporting them?
That's a huge question, and it brings up another point Sahota makes about the accuracy of these AI systems. What if they make mistakes? He actually says in the transcript how bad the consequences of errors could be.
Yeah, I can see that.
Especially if a legal resident or even a citizen is mistakenly flagged for deportation.
It doesn't sound like those systems are perfect.
They're not. They're only as good as the data they learn from, and if that data is biased or incomplete, the AI will be flawed too.
It really makes you think about all the things that could go wrong.
It does, and those worries about accuracy and bias are also something Laura McCleary brings up. She's from Unidos US. She points out that we already have tons of data on people, things like DMV records, utility bills, even facial recognition data.
We do leave a pretty big digital trail, don't we?
We do. And with AI, all that info could be analyzed and used to find and deport people.
So it's like AI is connecting the dots between all these different pieces of info.
Exactly. Your address, your energy use, even your social media, it could all be combined to build a profile that might be used against you.
That's kind of unsettling.
It is, and it brings up some serious ethical and legal questions about privacy and data security.
You're right, it's not just about undocumented immigrants either, right?
Nope. McCleary actually says it's inevitable that U.S. citizens will get caught up in this too.
Oh, wow.
And that raises even more concerns about violating people's rights to due process. I mean, if citizens are at risk of being unfairly targeted, what protection do undocumented immigrants have?
It's a good question. It makes you think about the bigger picture, like how much power we're giving to AI.
It really does.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just some hypothetical scenario.
Right.
The technology to do all of this already exists.
So it really comes down to how it's used, how it's regulated and controlled.
Exactly. Okay, but before we dive more into that, the source material actually presents a totally different viewpoint.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're introduced to Marina Shapelsky. She's an immigration lawyer.
Okay.
And she's surprisingly optimistic about how a second Trump administration might handle AI.
That's interesting after all the concerns we've just been talking about.
I know, right? She actually thinks they might prioritize deregulation and growth of AI, but for economic reasons, not for tougher immigration control.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It really challenges the idea that AI will mainly be used for surveillance and enforcement.
So instead of a crackdown, she thinks Trump might see the potential of AI to boost the economy.
Exactly.
Well,
She even thinks he might encourage foreign AI experts to come to the U.S. to help with innovation.
huh, that's pretty unexpected.
It is. Basically, she thinks Trump, as a businessman, sees AI as something that could help the economy grow.
Makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah, and she's even optimistic that he'll push for less strict regulations to help AI advance faster.
Wow, she's not worried at all.
Not really. The transcript quotes her saying she's not an alarmist and thinks Trump will help AI grow.
That's a huge contrast to those earlier fears about AI being used as a weapon.
It is. It's like we're seeing two sides of AI. One side is all about control and surveillance, and the other is about innovation and economic progress.
It's pretty mind-blowing how different those perspectives are.
It really is, and that's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with simple answers here. There are nuances, complexities, and things we haven't even thought of yet. It's not just about immigration, it's about how AI will change society, the economy, and our basic rights.
Before we go to the next part, it's pretty amazing how different all those expert opinions are. It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and it really highlights why it's so important to think critically and understand all sides of this issue. We can't just take these predictions as fact. We need to talk about them, consider the consequences of different approaches to AI.
Definitely. Okay, so in the next part, we'll be looking closer at what these contrasting perspectives could mean for all of us.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned. All right, so we've heard some pretty different views on how AI might be used for immigration, right?
Right.
Like some experts are really worried about mass deportations and AI surveillance expanding into communities.
Uh-huh.
But then there's that idea that a second Trump administration might actually loosen the rules around AI and encourage its growth for economic reasons.
Yeah, it's almost like AI is this double-edged sword.
I know, right?
It has this amazing potential to do good, but it could also really hurt people.
Yeah, and this isn't just some theory.
Oh,
We're
right.
already seeing examples of this happening right now.
That's true.
Like, remember those AI-powered drones Sahota mentioned?
Yeah.
They might seem like they're just keeping the border secure, but what if they're used to track people's movements inside the country?
Exactly. That's when it starts to feel a bit creepy, you know?
Yeah, it does.
It's like that line between security and surveillance gets all blurry.
Uh-huh.
And the thing is, once these systems are in place, it's tough to control how they get used.
Right.
Like a technology that's meant for one thing could easily be used for something totally different.
It's kind of like those sci-fi movies where AI takes over.
Yeah, you know what you mean.
But even without going that far, it seems like there's a real risk of AI making existing inequalities even worse.
Exactly. We can't forget that AI systems are created by people,
Right.
and they can pick up the biases of those people.
Oh, I see.
So if the data used to train these systems is biased, then the AI will just keep repeating those biases.
That makes sense.
And this is especially scary when it comes to something like immigration enforcement, where the stakes are so high.
So, what can we do about it?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
It feels like AI is just going to play a bigger and bigger role in our lives.
Right.
And we need to make sure it's used responsibly.
I agree completely.
It's so important to be talking about this now.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about how AI will affect us and demanding that people developing these systems are transparent and accountable.
Yeah, we need safeguards to prevent things from going wrong and to protect people's rights.
Are there any actual steps being taken to deal with these concerns?
There are. Actually, quite a few things are happening.
Like what?
Well, there's this growing push to come up with ethical guidelines for AI development.
Okay.
And some organizations are even working on tools that can help spot and fix bias in AI systems.
So it's not all doom and gloom then.
Not at all.
There's hope that we can use AI for good and prevent it from being misused.
Yeah, I think so.
But it sounds like it requires us to be aware, engaged, and proactive.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and accept whatever technology comes along.
Right?
We need to be actively shaping the future we want.
It feels like a lot of responsibility.
It is.
But it's also empowering to know that we have a voice in all of this.
Absolutely. Our choices really do matter.
Uh-huh.
The decisions we make today about how AI is developed will affect us for a long time.
It's not just about the technology, it's about our values and what kind of world we want to live in.
Right, and this whole conversation reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, due process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How can we make sure that due process is protected when AI is making decisions?
It seems impossible.
It's definitely a huge challenge, but it's one we can't ignore.
For sure.
Maybe one solution is to always have a human involved when an AI system makes a decision that will significantly affect someone's life.
So, like, if an AI flags someone for deportation,
Yeah.
a human judge would make the final decision after looking at all the evidence.
All right, exactly.
That sounds like a good start, but how can we be sure that the judges aren't just going along with what the AI says?
That's a really important point. We need to make sure human judgment isn't just being ignored because of an algorithm.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be ways to flag cases where the AI's suggestion seems off, or where there are problems with the data. So it's like having checks and balances for AI.
I like that idea. Okay, but what about that other perspective we talked about earlier?
You mean about a second Trump administration, maybe focusing on deregulating AI to help the economy?
Yeah, how does that fit in with all this talk about ethical AI and protecting people's rights?
It definitely makes things more complicated.
Yeah.
On the one hand, loosening the rules could lead to fast innovation and economic benefits.
Right.
But on the other hand, we might end up with AI running wild without any safeguards, and who knows what could happen then.
It's like that classic dilemma. Progress versus being careful.
Exactly. And finding that sweet spot is so important. It's not about stopping innovation. It's about making sure that innovation is guided by ethics and doesn't hurt people.
So how do we find that balance?
It's tough, but I think it starts with open discussions and working together.
Okay.
We need to bring everyone to the table. Tech people, policymakers, ethicists, and the people who will actually be affected by these technologies. We have to listen to each other, learn from each other, and find solutions that work for everyone.
It's not just about coming up with technical fixes then.
Right, it's about understanding each other and being committed to making sure AI is developed responsibly.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about building that shared understanding.
Exactly.
But what about us as individuals? What role do we play in all of this? It feels kind of overwhelming, you know?
It's easy to feel that way, but I think we have more power than we realize.
In what way?
Our voices matter.
Okay.
We can demand transparency and accountability from our leaders.
Uh,
We can support organizations fighting for ethical AI, and we can educate ourselves and others about how these technologies will affect us.
so we don't just wait for someone else to fix it.
Right.
We each take responsibility and do what we can to make sure AI is used for good.
Exactly. We're all in this together, and every little thing we do can help.
So what can our listeners do after this deep dive to learn more and get involved?
There's tons of stuff out there.
Like-
You could start by checking out the websites of organizations working on AI ethics and governance.
Okay.
Lots of them have great articles, reports, even online courses to help you understand these things better.
Are there any specific ones you recommend?
Oh, definitely. The AI Now Institute at NYU is a great place to start.
Okay.
They do a lot of research on the social impact of AI.
Interesting.
They have really insightful stuff on algorithmic bias, surveillance, how AI is affecting jobs.
I'll have to check that out.
And another good one is the Partnership on AI.
What's that?
It's a group with major tech companies, academics, and organizations from civil society.
Wow.
They're all working together to develop best practices for AI development and how it's used.
Those sound like good places to start. But what about for people who want to do more than just read about it?
There are lots of ways to get involved.
Like what?
You can contact your elected officials and tell them to support laws that promote ethical AI. You can volunteer or donate to organizations working on these issues, or even just talk to your friends and family about this stuff.
To raise awareness.
Exactly. Just getting people thinking about it can make a difference.
Those are great ideas. It's encouraging to know there are so many people already working on this and that more people can get involved.
It really is a global movement, and it's getting bigger all the time.
You know, as we're wrapping up this part, I'm realizing this isn't just a conversation about technology.
What do you mean?
It's about humanity.
Oh, I see.
It's about who we are, what we believe in, and what kind of future we want to build.
I totally agree. AI is like a reflection of our own values.
Yeah.
It's up to us to make sure that reflection is something we can be proud of.
So where do we go from here? What's next in this deep dive?
Well, we've talked about how AI might affect immigration, both good and bad.
All right.
We've talked about why ethical AI is so important and how to protect people's rights.
Uh-huh.
Now it's time to step back a bit and think about the bigger picture. How is AI changing the way we live, work, and connect with each other?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And what are the long-term consequences of all these technological changes?
That sounds like a great topic for the next part.
I think so too.
I'm really looking forward to exploring those bigger questions with you.
Me too.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we've really gone deep on this, huh? From AI maybe being used for mass deportation to like helping the economy grow. It seems like the effects AI could have, especially if Trump is elected again, are massive and kind of hard to predict. What do you think were the biggest things we found out today?
I think what really stood out to me is how AI could change the whole relationship between the government and, well, us as individuals. Remember how we talked about surveillance maybe going beyond borders right into communities?
Yeah.
That's a huge change in how governments could watch and even control people.
It does kind of blur the lines between public and private stuff.
It
I mean, even things like how much energy we use or what we do online could be used to build a profile for, like immigration enforcement. That's not exactly a comforting thought.
No, it's not. And it brings up some really basic questions about privacy and like how much control we have over our own lives in this digital world.
Right.
If governments can get all this data, how do we make sure they use it responsibly and ethically? Where do we draw the line? These are questions we need to figure out now.
Yeah, and it's not just about government surveillance either.
Right.
We also talked about AI automating those immigration decisions, which could lead to deportations without much human involvement at all.
It's a big worry when you think about due process and being treated fairly. If we let algorithms make these life-changing choices, how can we know they're not biased? How can people even challenge those decisions?
It's almost like we're giving up too much control to machines. Shouldn't these big decisions ultimately be made by people who can, like, understand the whole situation, all the little details about each person?
I think that's a really important point. That's why it's so crucial to have clear rules and regulations for how AI is used for these important things. We can't just assume these systems will always make the right choice. We need humans checking them. accountability, and ways for people to appeal if they think something's wrong.
It feels like we're in uncharted territory here.
We are.
AI is changing so fast.
I know.
And we're still figuring out how to manage it all, how it affects society.
It is uncharted. And that's why it's so important to keep having these conversations, to really grapple with how complicated it all is. There might not be any easy answers, but by listening to different perspectives, we can start to understand the challenges and the possibilities that AI brings.
So what does this all mean for the people listening? What should they be thinking about after we're done here?
I'd say don't think of this as like a set-in-stone prediction of what's going to happen. Think of it more as a wake-up call.
Okay.
The future of AI isn't decided yet. It's something we're creating right now with the choices we make.
So we're not just watching it happen, we're shaping it.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in making that future. We can stay informed about what's new. We can push for responsible AI policies. We can talk about it with people we know. It all makes a difference.
And this deep dive was specifically about what might happen if Trump gets elected again and how it could affect immigration.
Right.
But these questions about how AI impacts society, those are relevant no matter who's in charge or what specific policy we're talking about.
AI is going to change everything.
I know, it's kind of wild to think about.
It's not just about immigration, it's about healthcare, education, jobs, the justice system, everything.
So this is really about having a much bigger conversation, right? What kind of future do we want? One where technology helps people, not the other way around.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about using technology to empower people, to make things fair, and create a better world for everyone.
That's a great way to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it got you thinking and maybe inspired you to keep learning about the amazing and sometimes scary world of AI. We'll see you next time.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel US Immigration News. We hope you are doing great. Well, in today's videos, we will be talking about how Trump's master deportations plan into the AI to extend the immigration's crackdown. In this video, the discussion focused on how the artificial intelligence could play a key role in the advancing former President Donald Trump's mass deportation plan. Trump's signature campaign promise to immediate the mass deportations and the facial legalizations challenges. But the AI technology may offer the solution to the streamline and expose these efforts had under the Biden administrations. The Department and the Homeland and the Security DHS in the begin prioritize in the integrations in the creating the artificial intelligence safely and the security board of the stabilize and the guidance for its use. Dispute the promise, expert worry that the AI might be the use for the mass surveillance and the tracking not only the border areas but also the inland the US communities. Petra Moner and the researcher in the migrations technology warned that AI could be exploited in the surveillance capability of the government agency, possibly in blaying unchecked deportations effort. The concern is the AI could be the bypass traditional and the legal processes, automating the decision making and the reinforcing the basis of especially in the immigrants communities. The role of the AI in the border security is already significant with the system like AI provided drones and the sensors towards identifying the illegal crossing the potential threats. However, the expert like the Neil Strota predicted these the technologies could be the further explored under the Trump's administration to enhance the deportation effect. The use of facial recognition and behavior analysis could be spanned the deportations, but they are the concern about the privacy violence and the risk of the wrongful dispositions due to AI errors. Critics and including Laura McCleary, the UNIDO US points out of the AI accuracy issues, particularly when they applied to the people of the color, could be result in the wrongful identification of the US citizens of the legal agents for their deportations. While some like the immigration's autonomy, Marian Speckley argue with the AI could be used to improve the efficiency and the reduce red tape of the immigration processes. The potential for the abuse remain high. In the summary, while the AI represents the opportunity to faster and the more efficient and immigration enforcement, its use to amass deportations and raises significant concern regarding the privacy, fairness, and the potential for the error that could be the devastating and the constitutive of the family.